Hey everyone, this is BlackRockSC, and in this video I'm going to talk about LRMs and some changes that has occurred with LRMs and with the skill tree patch. LRMs is a playstyle that many people like, and sometimes I enjoy playing it too because especially if I'm trying to relax, if I don't really want to aim, don't want to think too much, then LRMs can be a really fun playstyle. So first, I think what I want to show is a LRM skill tree that I built for my awesome 8R. And then we can go into the specific changes that affected the LRM playstyle's position in the meta today. So here we see the skill tree for the awesome 8R. Now, I would have to mention that the skill tree that I built for the 8R may change for different mechs depending on if they're like a medium LRM boat, a heavy LRM boat, or like an assault LRM boat. So these skill trees, your skill tree decisions might actually differ depending on what mech you have. But I think this is a pretty good starting point for if anybody wants to start building an LRM skill tree. Okay, so we are not concentrating, we really don't care too much about range. Unlike laser boats, we really don't care about range so much. And this is because if you're not aware that LRMs move fairly slowly, so having greater range generally don't help. Maybe beyond, most of your shots are going to be taking place under 500 meters for the most part. So we're going to not spend too much on range. What we really do want is cooldown and heat gen. And those are the things that we're going to aim for. We had to kind of get this laser duration here just to get this cooldown, cooldown velocity and missile spread here. I think missile spread is kind of nice. There's really only 2 missile spread nodes in this skill tree, which only decreases missile spread by 5% max. But I think it is still kind of helpful if you can get it, especially since that they're near the heat gen and they're kind of near the important nodes anyways, like heat gen and cooldown. Similarly here, we have it kind of close to the cooldown skills as well. Velocity can also be somewhat important. You're only going to get up to a 10% velocity increase with this node that I've unlocked here. So it could be kind of nice, if they're if the enemy that you're targeting is in that 500 meter range. I would say I say 500 meters because that's kind of the general distance that I try to keep my targets under. Preferably actually they're lower, even like 400 to 300 meters, so that I don't miss. And now we can move on to the armor quirks. Sorry, the armor skills. I'm still calling it quirks. We move on to the armor skills, and because the awesome is a fairly large target, it's easy to hit, and I think a lot of people know that already. We're going to spend a lot of points on the armor tree. Especially on the skeletal density, because the awesome 8R has base structure quirks already, so that the skeletal density skills will be more beneficial than armor hardening in this case. We didn't spend so much on agility. I just had like 1 point left over from all of my unlocks, so I kind of just put it on kinetic burst. Agility is not terribly important for LRM boat because normally it's behind some cover. A lot of times it's firing indirectly, so I'm not moving around as much. I'm not doing something like a peek and poke kind of playstyle, so agility is not terribly important, at least in my opinion, for the LRM boats. Okay, and here we really want the heat containment and the cool run skills, but they're kind of like a lower priority than some of the weapon skill trees. So especially to get some of these lower nodes here, I have to unlock a whole bunch of nodes that I don't really need. So I kind of just unlocked the kind of like the beginning portion of the operation skill tree. Normally now you can obviously remove some maybe some survival skill tree points and then put them on here, and that's definitely an option. But I don't think that these are terribly important. So now here we get to the sensor systems, and this is the one that you really need to unlock for. It's actually not terribly expensive to unlock all the nodes that you need for LRM boats. And what we really want to have is I think it's the 5 target decays. This one, this, and this, and this. Okay, so we just really want to unlock the target decays here. Target retention is not really useful. This is, as you can see, it's only useful when the enemy moves behind the pilot mech. So it's not really, you're not really going to fire LRMs behind you. So that's not really, it's not really going to be useful. Sensor range, similarly, it's not terribly useful either. So, but target decay is, and it's not too expensive to unlock all 5 here. So I want to get into the topic of whether LRMs became better or worse with this skill tree. And I want to, first of all, premise that with an example that I kind of gave before, which I said I believe lasers actually got slightly worse with the skill tree as compared to, say, ballistics. And so my judgment was based on the fact that ballistics and ballistic playstyles don't really need to have a lot in the agility spectrum and in the mech operations tree. So whereas you do actually need to spend, this is an example of a laser vomit Timberwolf build that I have. So in the laser vomit playstyle, you do need that agility to get back into cover quickly, poke out, because you're kind of playing this peek and poke kind of playstyle. So agility would really help there. And mech operations, as I kind of mentioned earlier, has this cool run and heat containment skill trees, which is kind of just simply getting back some of the skills that you had before. Now, remember with ballistics, on the other hand, they don't need to spend as much on mech operations and on agility. Before the skill tree, like, you had to get these anyways. You automatically got them when you elited your mech or when you mastered your mech, right? So they weren't as useful for an AC mech as it is for like laser vomit mech. So because you had to spend more on these nodes that you had for ballistic mechs, you were kind of spending quote unquote skill points on skills that you didn't need before, and now that you don't have to, I think ballistics got a little bit better than they were. The drawback, I think, I was looking at several of my ballistic mechs versus laser mechs, and laser mechs end up spending a little bit less on here because I think ballistics need more of these cooldown and these velocity nodes. So that's kind of in exchange for not having to spend any skill points on operations and mobility. You do have to, you do end up spending more in firepower for ballistics. So how did LRMs come out in this change then? Well, similar to ballistics, I think, you do not need to spend as much in agility and in mech operations as well. So heat is a problem for LRMs, but it's not such a huge issue as it is in laser mech. So I think it's wise to spend some points on mech operations, but not really it's not super necessary. And similarly in agility, we're not playing that peek and poke playstyle, so the kind of the agility that we got before when we automatically mastered your LRM mech can be spent on something else, right? So I think the firepower skill tree is kind of a wash, right? So every playstyle is going to spend maybe 35 to 45 skill points on the firepower skill tree. So I don't think it's really that. That's kind of a wash, I think. So the difference is really going to come down to the other skill trees that you do not have to unlock for LRMs. And looking at it from that perspective, I think the LRMs do have a little bit of an advantage as compared with before, because it doesn't have to spend so much on these skill trees. The next thing we're going to look at is the sensor system skill tree, which I think ended up benefiting LRMs as well. So if you recall from the previous skill system in MWO, every mech starts out with at least one mech module. And a lot of people, I think most people who have at least the GXP to unlock radar deprivation and had the C-bills to unlock radar deprivation, ended up getting that radar deprivation module as the first and only mech module until they get to the second, until they get to mastery, which then they probably bought advanced seismic. And you should know that radar deprivation is one of the main deterrents of LRMs, because it allows the mech, unless the LRM mech has target decay, it allows the mech that has radar deprivation module to break lock as soon as they get back to cover, which made LRMs much less effective. What we're looking at here is a skill tree unlock for the Kodiak 3, which is a non-ECM, non-LRM mech. So in kind of like the normal mech case, if you want to get a radar deprivation, the same radar deprivation back as you had before, you need to spend 14 skill points in order to unlock the same thing that you could have gotten with the mech module as you did before. Now, this wouldn't be such a problem if along the 14 nodes, I mean, essentially you have the 5 radar deprivation nodes and you have like 9 other ones that you're unlocking. It would not be such a problem if the 9 other nodes were also very useful as well. But in reality, they're usually not that important, especially like the target retention, which really again takes effect only when the mecha is behind you. Sensor range, it's kind of okay in some cases. I think maybe for light mechs. Target info gathering can be nice again in certain situations, but in general, like they're not as important as something like cool run, heat containment, agility, and things like that. So what this means is that in order to get the same radar deprivation, you have to sacrifice a lot of other skills, for example, in the agility skill tree, to get the same thing back. So a lot of players are ending up they're either not touching this sensor skill tree at all for like, medium, heavy, and assault mechs, or they're unlocking maybe a half of the radar deprivation skills that they have. So what this also means is that LRMs in turn become more effective, right? I think a lot of players have gotten accustomed to not being afraid of LRMs when they get into the higher tiers, when they have more experience, because they learn to use cover and things like that. But when you get a map like Polar Highlands, or you get a map like I don't know, like Caustic Valley, where it's completely open, LRMs can be a pretty big threat in I would say solo play. So in those cases, not having radar deprivation is a really big benefit. A lot of mechs not having radar deprivation is a really big benefit to LRM carriers. The last point that I want to make is about ECM, the changes in ECM in this last patch. And this is something I think that wasn't really noticed immediately. It wasn't super obvious to everybody. So what we're looking at here is the May 16 patch notes. And somewhere in the middle of everything, you have this thing here. The base range of detection scrambling reduced to 30% from 75%. So, and then you can have the rest of the 45% unlocked via the enhanced ECM nodes in the skill tree. Now let's look back at the sensor skill tree for an ECM mech like the Hellbringer. So in order to get back the same ECM range that you did before, you have to unlock 13 skill points in order to get to the 2 enhanced ECM nodes here. Now again, it's the same problem. To unlock everything here, you need to go through a bunch of things that you really don't need for ECM mechs. So if a lot of times some people are just either foregoing ECM altogether on their ECM capable mechs, or they're or sometimes they haven't noticed that, and then they're leaving this skill tree unlocked, thinking that the ECM is still behaving as it was before. But now, without the ECM skills, your base ECM range, so the range that a mech can detect you, is 560 meters instead of, I think it was 200 meters before. So that was a huge ECM nerf, as you could say. In order to get back the same ECM performance as you had before, you had to sacrifice a bunch of skills that you could have had. So it should be obvious that the ECM nerf is a big benefit to the LRM mechs out there, since ECM before, and still to a certain degree, prevent locks that you need in order to fire LRMs. So in conclusion, did LRMs actually get better with this patch? And I think with the evidence that we have seen thus far, and I think the answer would be yes. It's not that LRMs are super awesome or great now. They still have plenty of drawbacks, such as high face time, the inability to target specific components, and many, many other things. And sometimes you just get maps that are just not LRM friendly, like River City, for example. But overall, relative in position to other playstyles, I do think LRMs did get better. They're still, I think, inconsistent because of the map selection and sometimes the teams that you get, but I think they actually got better. So why don't I just leave you guys with a gameplay video of the awesome 8R on Polar Highlands. So hope you guys enjoy, and I hope you guys learned something from this video.
They have UAV up, guys.
Punish that stalker. Thanks.
Target destroyed. New target acquired.
Galt. Attack. Let me take down that UAV. Never mind.
Pretty good now.